Because I thought we were working towards it being legalised, I was the only firm that took credit cards. My goodness, there's nothing like that instant, you know, what's the phrase that I'm looking for? That, you know, that, sorry? You know, when you've got the... I remember one man that he got his wife's credit card. Can you imagine? He got his wife's credit card, and when she found out, you know, he tried to make up all sorts of stories, you know. And then, of course, they were all often the Asian... Unfortunately, it was always Asian guys that had cloned the cards. If ever we got a knockback, it was all of these dodgy Asian cards that we used to get. But so anyway, if anybody runs a business, you'll know that you've got the VAT threshold, and I couldn't quite see how I was going to do VAT invoices. So I thought, well, I'll just get up to the 75,000 or whatever it was, and then I'll have to do another company. So anyway, I first started off and I said I was an aromatherapist. The business was, strictly speaking, I could do a good massage. So it's a aromatherapist. Anyway, the business grew and the bank manager was very happy. And then I was getting close to the 75,000, so I thought, right, what shall I do next? So then I went to the bank manager and I said, I'm starting this bed and breakfast. He went, gosh, you're very busy. I went, yep. And then once again, we get up to the threshold. So the third business I formed, I was a public relations company. Vanessa, you know, wow, you're doing all these things. And, but, you know, I was trying to pay tax. Well, because actually, you know, you might not believe it, but I'm quite a moral type business person, and I believe that we should be paying tax. I believe that, you know, and I thought I was doing it right. Don't you see? I was doing it right. In my mind, I was doing it right. We were all going to be legal. Everything was going to be fine. I ran the perfect place in my head, and that was it. I mean, everything was going to be hunky. We were all in a win-win situation. That's the way that I viewed it anyway. But of course, my logical thinking, it didn't work out with the police's logical thinking. So yeah. I must tell you that the busiest time that we ever had was when it was the Tory party conference. And because I had this big detached house and rented, and they'd send along their lackeys to check us out before, you know, some of the big boys would come along. But another thing I just remembered that after I was arrested, the police guy said to me, how do you feel about helping us? He said, you know, it might be good for your case. And I went, oh, yeah, that's fine, OK. What happens? He said, well, somebody will ring you up. I said, OK. So anyway, I got this phone call, and this guy called himself a name, let's say John Smith for the sake of. And he said, right, we'd like to meet you, Vanessa. Where shall we meet you? So I thought, well, somewhere away from Bournemouth where people know. So I said, I'll meet you at the Grange. Okay. So I went in the Grange on my own. So this is before I've gone to prison, because I'm thinking that, you know, if I help these guys, you know, like you see in the movies, that it's going to help me with my sentence. So I go into the Grange, and there's these two guys at the bar, and I walk straight over to them, and they said, why did you come straight to us? I said, you just look like these kind of people, you know, undercover kind of people. So anyway, they said to me, eventually, you know, would I be like I don't know what you would call it, but somebody who gave them information about what was going on. And I said, how can I give you information when you've taken me out the circle? You know, how can I help you with traffic girls, anybody doing drugs, when now I'm out of it? What a silly system. Why didn't you come to me when I was in it and say, look, you know, you could really... I said, but not only that, I always used to help you anyway. I always used to ring you up when there was something, somebody dodgy, something happened, or what have you. You see, it's very important to work with numbers. I had a black girl that worked for me, and she started taking drugs, so I had to let her go. And I remember this very clearly. I remember her running up to me one day in the street, and she gave me a hug, and Vanessa, and I said, how are you? She said, fine, blah, blah, blah. 3 weeks later, she was dead. She'd been murdered, and she was working on her own. And I didn't realise, but this girl, she had a degree. It was in the newspapers. I don't know if you remember this black girl, very nice. And the other reason, one other person that I tried to help, she'd been on the streets, and she came to me, and I tried. I'd never experienced drugs before, and when I first saw people and they were a bit kind of tired. I thought they were tired. I didn't realise that they were gouching. You know, I was to learn all these things. But anyway, I tried to help her. So I thought, well, if I keep her away from people, and I said, you'll be all right. After 5 days, you'll be fine. Anyway, I think we got to day 4, and then she kind of ran. Somebody came for her, and she was back on the drugs, and off she went. Anyway, about 6 or 7 months later, she was a daughter of a doctor in Blandford. 6 or 7 months later, friends of mine went to visit somebody in St Anne's, and she was there. And she sent me a message, could I let her have some shoes? So I sent her some shoes. And apparently 3 or 4 days later, this girl was 21, 22. She took a taxi to Beachy Head and threw herself off. And there were several girls that I knew that died. Drugs, it was all drugs.
To do with state drugging of people by different drugs? Yeah.
I don't know if any of you have read these stories where, if you have this belief where before you come onto the earth that you pick the life that you want. I don't know if anybody read these things. Well, I must have wanted to be very nosy and inquisitive and try everything, because I also tried St Anne's. I kind of lost it, and I don't even know why. I remember getting heart pains, and I was taken to the Bournemouth Hospital, and they said there's nothing wrong with her heart, but we're very worried about her mental state. And a few days later, I found myself, and I can still see this to this day, but if you're ever afraid in your life, and you actually fear that people are trying to kill you, and that's what I believed at this particular... And I was running, I kept running, and I remember running, and this car stopped at the lights, and the driver looked, because the next thing is I'm in at the side of him on the floor, crashing. Keep driving, I said, keep driving. And I really had this terrible, terrible breakdown for about 3 or 4 days, so, but... I'd always thought that St Anne's was going to be a peaceful place because it backed onto the sea, So I'd created, but, I manifest things by my thoughts. And sometimes maybe I should look a bit further into what I'm thinking about, and... So while I was in prison, I got a visit from my barrister, and he said to me... right, I need a list of all your assets, where you keep them. Well, believe it or not, in the years that I did make good money, but, for people that know me, they know that I shared things. I had a boyfriend that I took around the world. We had great times. I lived the life. I'm not a collector. I'm not a hoarder. I think life is very short. I think you should enjoy everything, carpe diem, enjoy the moment, seize the moment, and I certainly did. And I'd take people on holiday with me and things like that. So I put a lot of money back into the property, so I spent it. But yeah, the proceeds of crime, I had to fill in this form. And anyway, I think I'd been out of prison, and then the property had to be sold oh yeah, that's another thing. When I was arrested, the bank account was frozen, and this is Friday the 13th, and we got tickets. There was me and Elizabeth and 2 friends. We got tickets to go to Turkey the following week that were in the house. They took the tickets and they said to me, "Oh, don't you think you're going to Turkey?" And I went, I didn't expect to go. Anyway, come there. We're due to go on the Monday morning, and one of the friends who was with me, she went to see the police on the Monday morning because she wanted her ticket. So when she got there, they said to her, "We've been trying to get hold of Vanessa." And she said, "Well, it's hardly likely. You've got her phone, how can you get hold of her?" They said, "Oh, please, it's very important." So she got hold of me, and they spoke to me, and they said, "Vanessa, we'd like you to come in." I said, "Well, as long as you don't put me in a cell." So they said, "No, come in." Anyway, when I got in there, so it's late morning on the Monday, they said, we've decided that you can go to Turkey. And I said, "Well, I don't want to go." And they said, "What do you mean you don't want to go?" I said, "There's no time now. Somebody's got to look after the animals. It wasn't planned." They said, "Oh, you can do it." I said, "But I haven't got any money. You've taken all my money away." So they said, "Well, don't worry." They said, "We'll give you back 2 credit cards. Which credit cards would you like?" So I thought, quickly, which has got the most money on? So I just chose, unfortunately, for Lloyd's, I think it was, and maybe Halifax. Yeah, Lloyd's and Halifax. And so they gave me back the credit card so that I could go on holiday for a week. But it wasn't... It was a peculiar time because obviously I knew what I was going to come back to us. And they said, "Yeah, as long as you ring us when you come back." So I thought, they must be following me or they're thinking I'm going to do something. I couldn't believe that they were going to let me go, But, the assets were frozen and everything had to be sold. But what had happened was I'd lent my son £5,000 for his business, and I'd also lent a friend £15,000. So I wrote it. I told them about this money, you see, and thought, well, that's fine because I've told them the way it is. Anyway, when I'm due to appear for the proceeds of crime, my barrister said, if you don't get this money back, you know that you're going to go to prison for 2 years. I went, but I can't get it back. The other guy, the property wasn't in his name. My son hadn't got the money, and so I thought, this can't be. I can't get the money. How can they send me to prison? Well, if you've lent somebody some money and you can't get it back, what do you do? So anyway, I got a phone call in this January 2 or 3 years ago to say, Vanessa, if your son doesn't, because my son had said he'd paid back so much a month, you see. The barrister said, no, tell him that if you don't get this money, you're going to go to prison. So thank goodness Elizabeth had just got enough money, and she lent my son the money. And I thought, well, at least that is my relation. He said that would help my case. Anyway, unbeknown to me, the proceeds of crime people had moved from Poole to Weston-super-Mare. And one day, it was one afternoon, we got a knock at the door, and 2 policemen were there with their warrants, and it was 5 o'clock at night, I think. They said, we've come to arrest you, to take you off. I said, why is that? And I could see they got a bunch of papers in their hand, but it was my old address. And they said, well, you know why? I said, no, I don't. How can I know why when I haven't got these letters? And so anyway, Elizabeth came out and started screaming hysterically, because they wanted to take me away. And I said, I can't leave her this time. I cannot leave her. I'll come in the morning. Anyway, eventually they said, okay. And then, so I was arrested the next morning and put in the cells. And after about 2 or 3 hours, duty solicitor came. And in the end I said, listen, I don't care, I'll go up on my own and speak. So I went up to the magistrates and they told me that I had to then appear at Weston-super-Mare the following week. And I said, but this is ridiculous, you know, I've said everything, my barrister's done all this, but no, I had to go. In fact, Sapphire came with me. We went to